My life has been full of twists and turns for the past few months, and it's about time y'all see why. It all started with Agma Schwa's announcement of the cursed Conlang Circus 2, a call to the linguistics community to submit their most twisted linguistic creations. At the sounding of that call, my countenance sombered, my breathing intensified, and the 1,000 years of pent-up energy of thunder's divine wrath filled me with motivation. I put pen to paper and started penning the worst, most convoluted language imaginable. Then I pissed away the next 2 months and had to rush to finish on time. This video is my short overview of the language I created, covering phonology, grammar, and including a sample. That language is the tornadic tongue of Chaserese. Act 1. The Phonology. Phonology is the study of how words are formed. So, for example, the English phonology is built up through these sounds. Yeah, don't worry about what any of this really means, because, my language doesn't do this. In my language, you form words by throwing objects into tornadoes. If you're wondering how anyone could possibly make sense of this language, don't worry, we'll get to it. Okay, I should probably explain what's going on here. The following is what I'm calling the basics of my tornology, or tornado phonology. Remember, these things are what distinguish meaning in my language. They are the item itself that's thrown into the tornado. This is what does most of the heavy lifting in my language. And this could be anything, like, rocks, for example. What part of the tornadic mesocyclone system affects the piles of objects? And, so this is basically whether it's a direct hit or not. The type of tornado, whether it's a rope, a stovepipe, or even a wedge, and the chirality, or which direction the tornado is spinning. An important caveat for what items count is that they must be within a specific size range of around 3 meters squared to be valid tornemes. Further, in this system, items represent both ideas and collections of properties. Throwing in a toy car, for example, might represent toy cars in general, or it could represent the idea of cars in general, or speed, or motor vehicles, or what have you. How to interpret these tornemes requires context and inference, and a supercomputer. Yeah, to address the tornado-sized elephant in the room, speaking this language is hard. It requires knowledge about events that is impossible to obtain without ubiquitous surveillance equipment, or a huge survey of the area, and, incredibly precise models to predict conditions to even know if a tornado will even be happening to allow you to speak. Hell, if you don't see where the piles are being thrown in, and where they manage to hit the tornado, you'll have to use a supercomputer to estimate where those objects came from originally to work out what piles they were a part of. I mean, it's a mess. But you can't really see that in full until you see Act 2, the grammar. The grammar of a language basically dictates how you use your morphemes to convey broader meanings. In English, we have nouns and verbs and all sorts of tricks. In Chaserese, the basic unit of sentences are clauses. There can be as many clauses in a sentence as you wish. Clauses are built up by piles of tornemes, like so. Piles can be tossed into the tornado or left on the ground to be intercepted. Sentences, on the other hand, are defined by tornado encounter, so one sentence per tornado, basically. And so you have as many clauses as you want, and as long as they hit a tornado, that's a sentence. Let's look at clauses in a little more detail. They are built up by a subject and a modifier, as you can see here. These are mostly analogous to the subject and predicate of normal sentences that you might be familiar with the notable exception that the modifier is more of either a verb or an adjective that describes what the subject is or does. Modifiers are distinguished by reduplication. The amount of reduplication dictates the strength of that modifier. Think of the difference between good and great, or best, in this case. There are two types of special clauses. effective clauses, and injective clauses. These names are just made up by me. Effective clauses are designated with a ring of some type of phone. Effective clauses are responsible, causatively basically, for all other clauses lower in rank than them. They do not affect injective clauses, though. The amount of rings of phones tells you where in the effective chain the clause is. So 2 rings of phones precedes a single ring of phones, which precedes no phone-ringed clauses. This allows us to dictate how clauses interact with each other. Injective clauses are marked by rings of some kind of eyewear like glasses. They tell you something about the sentence as a whole. This is basically where adverbs come in, but there's more than one way to form adverbs in the system, which I won't go into because I didn't really flesh that out. Okay, let's move on from clauses to random tidbits that are interesting. Whether the palace hit the tornado directly or not dictates tone. A direct hit is most polite, while a miss is insulting, of course. The type of tornado at the time of impact dictates the tense, so the thinner the tornado is, the farther in the past the action generally occurred. Yeah, that's right, that means the tense is a spectrum in this language. I honestly barely comprehend what that even means, so I'll just let you know that a stovepipe tornado represents the present. Finally, there are only 2 moods in this language, declarative and interrogative, otherwise known as statements and questions. You might not think that it's too cursed until you hear how these moods are formed. Moods are dictated by chirality of the tornado, or which direction the tornado is spinning. For practical reasons, cyclonic tornadoes produce statements, and anticyclonic tornadoes produce questions. Because statements are generally more common than questions, right? And this is the most practical language. This means to ask a question, you have to either pray that you happen upon the less than 1% of tornadoes that are anticyclonic in the northern hemisphere, or you have to move to try and catch the comparatively much rarer southern hemispheric tornado, which tend to be anticyclonic. So yeah, good luck trying to run a quiz show in Chaserese. And with that, we've covered all the important or funny bits of this language, so let's see this monstrosity in action with Act 3, the sample. Since I don't have access to a supercomputer and don't live in Tornado Alley anymore, I'm going to have to simulate the speaking portion with diagrams and clip art. On screen, you will see on the left a transcription, a basic plot of the structure, and a gloss of the sample text. On the right, you should see my copyright-free simulation of how to speak this language. It's definitely worth trying to pause and identify the objects in the piles and see what roles they play. Answers will be in the Google Doc in the description. For your information, piles will be grouped by parentheses in the little demonstration on the left. And with that, I suppose it's time to get started. Let's go. Act 4, the conclusion. Well, this was my submission. I hope you liked it and got something from this. Be sure to check out the other submissions, and of course Agma Schwa's channel for more great linguistics content. Oh, and if you like this style of content, maybe with some graphical updates and some better narration, let me know down below. It could be the motivation I need to make more videos on fun topics like this. Oh, and if you're wondering how this even is a language, well, I mean, it's definitely not code for a different language, so I think it counts. Maybe you want to call it a sign language? Sure. I'll take it. Anyway, I'm gonna go and report to Odin, so I'll catch you later, guys.